Good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to, on behalf of NALAS Network, on this first panel discussion in the series of events that are going to be organized in next few weeks with the idea to discuss the provision of the waste management service during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. My name is Miodrag Gluščević. I'm the program director for urban development, environment, and communal services with the Standing Conference of Towns and Municipalities, and I'm going to be your host for today. At the very beginning, let me give you some technical details. So only the panelists and the co-moderator and moderator are able to use video and the mics. All other participants are actually muted, and their video is disabled upon the entrance to the event. Though you will be able to participate by posting questions or comments through the Q&A section, which is in the lower part of your screens, or you will be able also to chat among yourselves and exchange using the chat function of this platform. Very important announcement at the very beginning. This is a recorded event. And by entering to it, you actually give your consent to be participating in the event that is being recorded. So this discussion we won't last more than 1 hour. We will have 3 rounds of questions with our panelists. I'll be posing questions in 2 first rounds, and then in 3rd round, you'll be able to ask our eminent panelists whatever you wish to ask them. Of course, we encourage you to pose the questions during the entire event. At the very beginning, I also wanted to introduce a feature of this event, which we introduced to make it more dynamic. So we will have 4 so-called poll questions that we want to ask you and find out your opinion about certain issues. And those opinions will be used later on when we are concluding and formulating conclusions of this event. Those questions are quite easy, and you will see them in a second on your screen. And I ask you to actually choose one of the answers, predefined answers. My today's co-moderator is Mr. Boran Ivanovski from NALAS, whom you can also see. Welcome, Boran. And at this point, I'm asking you to bring up the first question because we want to see actually who is attending this event. Boran, please. Okay, so at this point you can see the question. So we want to find out which kind of institutions you're representing. When the poll is done in a minute, you will also see and we all will be able to see the result. But not to lose too much time, since we don't have too much time at our hands. At this point, I want to introduce today's topic. So we are going to be discussing the provision of the waste management service, the business operations like collection, transport, recycling, disposal of the waste. In these extraordinary circumstances, we're also going to be touching up on the issues related to some economic problems that are public utility companies face. These are all very important questions for the companies, but also for the local authorities, which are in charge for creating enabling environment for the provision of the service. Having said that, I'm now want to introduce you to our today's panelists. We have three very eminent speakers. Just let me share the screen. Sorry about that. So today we have with us Mrs. Daniela Đurović, who is the Vice Mayor of the city of Herceg Novi from Montenegro. She is also a well-known waste management specialist who has been working in the waste management company for a long period of time. And she's also a member of NALAS Task Force for Solid Waste and Water Management. Also with us today, we have a guest from Sweden. This is Dr. Thomas Nylund, who is, I can say, one of the leading waste management experts in Sweden, and until recently has been director of the regional waste management company in the region around the city of Gävle in Sweden. Last but not least, we have Mr. Željko Ćimović, who is economic affairs manager in the public utility company Gradska Čistoća of the city of Belgrade in Serbia. Before we go into the first round of questions, I'm going to ask Boran to give us poll results. Okay, so this is actually not so unexpected. Most of the participants are coming from the local government, but we also have a good number of participants from the international organizations and associations. It would be though better if we had a bit more people from the public utility companies, but I think we're going to improve that in the future. Okay, so this was kind of warming up to our to going into the main discussion of today's event. At the very beginning, I want to ask Thomas, as coming from Sweden, which is one of the old member states with the well-developed waste management system, which is being actually provided mostly on a regional basis, where municipalities come together and jointly organize these services. But also Sweden is one of the countries that had somewhat looser COVID measures in place. So I want to ask you, how did the local governments in Sweden react to the necessity of having this obligation to provide service 24/7 in this unusual circumstances? Thomas?
Yes, firstly, thank you for having me in this panel. Thank you. Well, the collection of household waste in Sweden is a municipal responsibility by law, and it is classified as a critical societal operation. So there is a demand for keeping a certain level of in case of crisis planning and readiness at the municipalities and the public utility companies. And in cases like this, when some kind of crisis appear, a special executive group is called upon and gathered for a coordination of activities in the municipality and between the public utility company and other actors. And in this case, when the alarm came about the COVID-19 pandemic, where possible, extra staff was alerted in case that there would be a lack of staff due to the pandemic. For example, bus drivers were called upon to step in as garbage truck drivers if necessary. And on national level, it was discussed if garbage truck drivers also should be included in a category of prioritized professionals among hospital workers and others that should be granted access to childcare so that they could go to work. But this was not finally carried out, but it was discussed. The regular crisis planning includes what collection points should be given priority in case of lack of capacity. For example, housing areas with dense population are given priority. But the experience now, so far from the situation that has been, is that there has hardly been any problems. Operations has been running properly, business mainly as usual, at least regarding the household waste collection and treatment. Actually, I heard today that there has been less people on sick leave than during the Olympic Games or Ice Hockey World Championships. So business has been running properly as usual. Yeah.
Thomas, thank you for these insights. It's very interesting actually to hear. I would say also kind of recommendations. I mean, this idea of employing drivers from other services for the waste trucks is a quite interesting one. I didn't hear it so far. Maybe Željko will later on have something to say about that also. And also it's a pity that waste workers haven't been put in this priority category, because we, when we are discussing these kind of issues, see that the waste management is probably, in general, communal services are right up there with the medical care service, I would say, when it comes to the hygiene and the health of the public.
Yes.
Thanks once more. And now I'm gonna move to Daniela. As introduction, Thomas finished his intervention was saying that everything worked properly, and this is, I would say, general notion from the people that are not in the system. So I can say that also everything worked fine, you know, with no problems. But this is how it looks to us. How does it look to the people that are in the system? So Daniela, you as a part and a member of the, I would say, crisis management in the city of Herceg-Novi, what are your experiences? How actually Herceg-Novi managed this situation, and what priorities and what was asked from the public utility company in these extraordinary circumstances?
Well, hello Mile, hello everyone. It is a pleasure to be a panelist today. It is obvious that many things are changing due to the coronavirus pandemic. First of all, we are all concentrating on online meetings like we are today, rather than in person, but we will see what the future will be. Coronavirus pandemic has brought changes in everyday life to most of the people. As for Montenegro, I have to say that we as a country had quite strict measures in fighting the epidemic enforced and very early implemented. Due to that, we had less infected persons and low casualties, thanks God. Country borders were closed before first infected registered, and very soon after closed cafes, restaurants, hair, beauty salons, gyms, all other shops, except for those selling food and house cleaning and disinfection supplies, basically. And a police curfew was enforced quite early. almost all through weekends, and from 7 p.m. till 5 a.m. in the morning for the working days. Due to all that changes in waste management were inevitable. Some are seen from the general public and some not. Thanks God that they are not, because that means that we are doing a good job. I have to say that we as municipality crisis headquarters, where I'm also a member, insisted on two things, and first one, main one, was insisted on disinfection of public areas and enforcing social distancing to all. Together, of course, with waste management company, we agreed on necessary workflow and obligations. The issue of social distancing, commuting, personal protective equipment were of the highest importance. However, I understand that there will be topic for the next webinar, so I will not be talking about that today. My focus today will be on how we provided and how we maintain our service in waste management in the crisis, and especially in regarding to collecting, recycling, and manpower. This is where actually we had the most of the problems. In addition to regular waste collection and cleaning services, waste management company regularly washed waste disposal containers using a chlorine-based disinfectant prescribed by the World Health Organization as a measure to prevent the spread of COVID-19. Also, waste collecting trucks were disinfected every day after every shift. Collection of waste in frequency and number of locations were shortened. It was advised to citizens that the waste should be taken out between 5 and 7 a.m. in the mornings. Waste was collected only once a day for 6 days, without Sundays, for urban parts of the city, while the waste from rural parts of the city was selected twice a week. There was no need for night shift. Street sweeping was also performed from 6 a.m. in the morning until noon. That was also short. Altogether, I have to say that waste quantities were for 1/5 less than usually. On the other hand, street washing and disinfection was performed more often. Due to insufficient equipment, municipal protection and rescue service stepped in and helped with equipment and with the manpower. So disinfection was performed daily in city center and around quarantine premises, while other urban parts were disinfected every third day. Chemicals for disinfection were hard to find and expensive, so municipality has to step in and finance that. The major issue in this part of coronavirus pandemic was enabling sufficient workforce. Waste company in municipality of Herzegovina has that problem regularly. However, the majority of the workers was supplied usually from neighboring countries. Due to closing the borders, that was not possible. Furthermore, there was a group of workers that came to city before pandemic. However, one person arrived late, couple of days late, and was issued obligatory isolation for 14 days. But that person did not obey the rules, neither informed supervisors that they have to be isolated, and actually he stayed together with all other workers. There was premises that are organized by the waste management company. Anyhow, very soon police have arrived and found out that it was totally out of law, and all 20 workers had to be placed in the quarantine. Yes, for the 14 days. That was extremely expensive for the company, since the workers had to be paid while there was not enough workforce. That's actually a period that another company we have within the city stepped in and helped.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, well, we had. Yeah, we had problems with the financing. Yeah, of course, I have to mention that, but that is something that we'll probably discuss it later in some.
We will discuss it later. Yeah.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you very much, Daniela. I mean, those were some really interesting points, especially with these specific issues. You know, when your workforce actually has to come abroad, and with these restrictions in traveling. I mean, really, really interesting. And it's good to hear that you managed and coped with it. I mean, this is the first event, and we all, you know, are training and making mistakes. So we should have another poll question before this round. So I will ask Boran, actually, before we go to Željko, to give us second poll question. Thanks, Boran. And while you are voting, so we are asking you, what is your opinion? Which level of governance has the main responsibility, you know, to maintain the environment for the waste management service in these extraordinary circumstances? Before I go to Željko, just one question arrived from colleague from Albania, from Mr. Kopoliku, if I'm reading this correctly. He's actually asking about something that Daniela already mentioned, and this is the disinfection of public spaces. So just very briefly, Daniela, what public spaces did you disinfect? Were there some priorities there? Just in few words.
Yeah, as I mentioned, that was priority basically altogether. First priority definitely was premises, around the premises where quarantine was organized. I will talk about a little bit about those obligations, other obligations regarding quarantine in answers to the next question, next phase. Okay. But around quarantine, that was the first priority. That needed to be disinfected twice a day. Urban parts of the city were disinfected daily, while the other parts, because of the equipment that we had, it was continuously working on disinfection, but some points ended up on being treated once every 3 days.
So you had basically clear
streets,
idea.
Yeah, streets, parks, that public areas they are talking. And furthermore, as I said, equipment for the trucks and for the locations of the waste collecting bins. Yeah,
great. Thanks, Daniela. Okay, moving to Željko now. Željko, welcome once again. I wanted to ask you, as being person that is dealing with the economic issues and is in the management structure of the biggest waste management company in Serbia. And we know that upon introduction of these emergency measures and situations, some measures were also given by or recommended by the government to the citizens, especially certain groups of citizens, in terms of not being obliged to, you know, pay the bills, or extending those the term to pay the bills for the time after the crisis. So what is your experience in this regard, or experience of Gradska Čistoća? Did you introduce any additional benefits or measures, and how did it affect your business operation?
Yeah, greetings to all the panelists once again, and I'm really glad to be here. Greetings to the host as well. Well, in recent months, we have witnessed the coronavirus crisis, as well as probably one of the biggest economic crises that has affected the entire society of the planet in the last few decades. It is actually estimated that no country in the world will be immune to economic decline. In mid-March, due to the coronavirus pandemic, a state of emergency has been declared in Serbia, instituting a curfew, actually quarantine and the restricted movement for the citizens outside their homes, and which that lasts until early May. Well, all the measures that Gradska Čistoća here in Belgrade as a public service implemented was aimed to help citizens in relieving their budgeting during the state of emergency. We are here actually organized in some kind of billing system that is actually unified billing system for several local companies that provide utility services. And one of the accepted measures are those for the elderly citizens. As retired people, they were the most endangered by the COVID-19 virus, and those were the ages about 65 and the older, of course. We actually do the thing that they can pay their bills for the month February, March, and April on 2020 later during the year, and we managed it without charging any interest. So in order to help our users, we did not initiate any forced collection procedures during the state of emergency, and it will last for the period of those 19 days. All regular payers who paid on time, they are obligated and over the 65 age will be able to use their discount of 5, 6, or 7% during the state of this situation, state of emergency, and as well as subsidies for social disadvantages families on amount about 10 or 30%. And none of these groups of beneficiaries and subsidies will not lose their rights to discounts, regardless to the payment. Also the company will not charge interest on late payment for citizens during this specific period. I'd like to mention that last year, on the end of the last year, we take the measures where citizens with a debt to the public utility service can sign a contract to reschedule their debt. We actually put active again this measure, so during this period, if they didn't pay their bill, they can do it rescheduling till the end of this year. Those were some of kind of measures that we used to cover up this potentially budgeting on the citizens. Viewed on the level of Serbia, the main problem facing our utility companies is the drastic decline in liquidity caused by the poor collection of services that occurs. Namely, starting the middle March until today, there were the serious disturbances, which is a solution is not defined quickly, taken dimensions that can very quickly head to complete blockade and or paralyze our utility service. For example, put it on the numbers, until the middle of April, only 28% of receivables were collected of invoice from March. And that means that till the end of April, slightly 60% of invoiced services are collectible till the end of April. And considering this, we are government industry. Actually, we are some kind of service, and our salaries are the main costs. And that costs are about and around 60%. And it's clear if we found only 60% of our demands, we will slightly, have a problem to pay the salary for our employees. But that was the picture in whole Serbia. But in Belgrade, it's actually a little brighter picture. Again, to put it in numbers, for example, in March we have a decline of our inflows only around 11%. And most significant decline was from the companies, actually. But during the April, it had lower oscillations in inflows, which was only few percentage. But in May, we actually have a picture just like was a financial picture, just like was last year during the same period. But the main question is how the situation will actually affect the coming months.
Yeah.
not now. You know, the state has taken certain measures, some of which such was the wage aid, you know.
That's also one of the questions coming from the participants. So yeah, go on. Just briefly.
You know, when analyzing and projecting the liquidity, I think first of all, the question will be: have we enough funds to finance basic services? You know, as a large company like as Gradsko Čistoća here in Belgrade, you have the large use of the car fleet and employees. You know, and therefore the cost of car fleet and the cost of necessary needs and the cost of salaries for employees are very high. You always follow the line that the large company can provide a sustainable level of liquidity in the short term, thanks to accumulation. But however, we all operate in modern dynamic environment where the micro and microeconomic level, you expect all the situation, but you never expect pandemic, you know.
Yeah.
But however, yes, but however, in the long run, any business entity with the tendency of shrinking volume of inflows would face the impossible conduct its businesses at a sustainable level.
Okay, this is we're gonna move to that topic in the next round of questions. So, how did you manage actually to maintain the service with less means to operate? Thanks, Željko. We're gonna now see the results of the second poll question, and then after that, immediately jump to the third one. So yeah, this was also somewhat, I would say, expected. So the local government is the main level responsible for the communal services, but there is also we see the need in this kind of situations that the central government intervene, especially with this economic aid measures. So thank you for this. Boran, can we have, before the next round of questions, can we have a next poll question, please? Okay, now we are shifting a bit with this question to the actual business operations. So we have heard and seen that quantities of waste produced probably differ from the normal times. So we wanted to ask you about your opinion and how did these quantities vary? Were they higher, smaller, or the same during the pandemic crisis? You will have a couple of seconds to respond to that. But now we are moving to the next round of questions. I'm going back to Thomas. Thomas, we also have found out, especially during these times, that communication is maybe one of the key activity that needs to be even stronger during this kind of situations. So what messages and how did you communicate to your customers, and did you receive any instructions from regional or central government? So what are your experience in this regard?
Well, information was given or has been given to the public mainly on the home pages of the public utility companies and municipalities, but also through radio commercials. And regarding garbage collection and sorting, the message has been that collection will continue for the time being according to normal schedule. And that sorting and throwing of garbage should be done as usual. Just asking people to be a bit more careful, to close their garbage bags properly with the double knots, and if it's sickness, to use double plastic bags, not to overfill the bins, not to throw garbage on the ground. If they have more garbage than usual, then rather call for extra emptying in case. And regarding recycling yards for bulky waste, also the message has been that opening hours as usual, but that there is some limitations regarding visitors at the same time. There's been entrance guards letting people in by and by, so to avoid crowds at the recycling centers. And also call for the public to stay at home if they feel sick. That's according to the National People's Health Authority of Sweden that has communicated that, to stay home if you feel sick and wash your hands, etc. And for the visitors to the recycling yards to not bring their children with them, to use gloves, to keep distances to each other, 1.5 or 2 meters distances, and to try to avoid the peak hours, for example, Saturdays. And there's been information of the number of visitors during different times of the days of the week and hours and so on. So to avoid those peak hours. And the customer services at the public utility companies, of course, there's been very limited opening hours or even closed receptions, and asking people to use telephone, email, internet web pages to communicate instead of visiting us.
Yeah. Mm. And where you those kind of departments in the company were working from home or from the office?
Yes, garbage truck drivers and people at the staff at the recycling yards, they have been working as usual, but the office people, they have been recommended to work from home instead. Just a limited number of staff at the office.
Yeah, and what about we know that in Sweden, this is what we learned. One of the great messages that we got from Sweden is actually that every employee in the company is a communicator. I mean, truck drivers, they are coming face to face with the customers. And
they're ambassadors for the operations as well.
So did something change in this regard during these times? I guess probably.
No significant. I mean, the staff has been informed about all these things that matters now in this case of emergency, and to bring this information also to the customers that they meet.
Yeah. So and they did communicate these kind of messages. So use 2 bags, wash your hands, gloves, etc. And I guess they also led by example. So they were
Yes, that's very important. Also, so that our own workers keep distances between themselves as well. Yes. And regarding the effects on what this has had on recycling and the amounts of waste, we can't see that there has been any significant changes in amount of household waste. Maybe a slight increase because more people are working from home. Perhaps some more packaging materials, for example, cardboard, due to increased internet shopping instead of going to the shops. So people have got goods delivered to the households. So a slight increase, I would think, that there's been in cardboard and packaging materials. And actually at the recycling yards, even more visitors than usual. Due to the fact we think that people are staying at home and using more time for cleaning up and gardening, etc. So actually an increase of visitors to the recycling yards. With long queues now because we're not letting in so many people at the same time to visit the recycling yard.
That's very interesting. Actually, those are some things that you cannot.
Interesting observation. Of course, less waste from certain businesses. I mean, restaurants and shops have been closed or having less customers. So on the commercial side, the private commercial waste management companies, they have been forced to lay off people, actually, because they mainly provide services to the commercial side, and when shops and restaurants are closing, they have less waste, and so they have laid off people, actually.
Yeah, well, thanks, Thomas. Those were some really interesting, I would say, aspects that probably, you know, you cannot, you don't think and you don't expect, and then something like,
to get more visitors.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. At this point, I want to ask Boran. I want to ask Boran to give us the result of the third poll question, and we have some interesting results. So I would say it's a split decision between the bigger, smaller quantities, and then the answer that people are not sure about it. The only thing that we can be certain is that your opinion is actually that the quantities didn't stay the same, so that something did change during these times. With this in mind, I want to ask Daniela, how actually did it go with the quantities and then the recycling and the source separation in Herzegovina?
Yeah, well, yeah, I was just listening to Thomas, what he was saying, and I have to say that we have different experience than in Sweden. Definitely, crisis had bring us changes in habits, and it is yet to be seen. Are they going to be temporarily, or they're going to stay in the future? For Herzegovina, I can say that the fact that most of the people stayed home and were focusing on surviving with more time to spare, it's reflected on the quantity and on the composition of the waste. Even though the measurements and on waste, the composition and morphology were not performed, I have to say that, at this time, it was obvious from the practice that it has changed. People were more dedicated to waste separation, and they showed much higher discipline in that than before the crisis. Since most of the stores were closed, food and household cleaning and disinfection supplies were more present in the consumption and so in the waste also. For Herzegovina, I mentioned that before, but now it's interesting that we are that stage, saying that we have reduced the quantities of the waste for 1/5 or around 20%. Than usual quantity for this time of year. And have to say that's not same for the household and for the commercial waste. For the commercial waste, for those businesses who were working, for them it was noticed that the quantity of waste have a little bit is a little bit higher, and it's more packaging waste that is within that waste. On the other hand, for businesses, of course, they were not working, they were not producing any waste. For the waste household from waste from the households, the amount was a little bit smaller. But as I said, differences are in a composition of the waste. Also, recycling activities were performed by the waste management company, but that changed a little bit in practice. It was advised to people that separate, not just to the people, but also to from the municipality headquarters crisis team to the public utility company, that waste which is separately collected for the recycling to be stored and a special place for 72 hours before processing. Due to that, and in the regard that we have restraints on the space availability for storing the waste, on several occasions we had problems. Additionally, the semi-optimized recycling line that we have in Herzegovina had they actually stopped working due to bad maintenance before coronavirus. So everything that we could do was manual separation of the waste. And because of the pandemic, we decided that only paper cardboard will be recycled. So we have kind of absurd situation, people were more inclined for separation of waste, and then waste management company is actually recycling less, which it was strange.
This is interesting, and I just if I understood you correctly, so you let all the mixed waste you left all the mixed waste for the 72 hours to kind of rest?
No, just for those separate recyclables.
Recyclables.
Just
okay.
For recyclables. Yes.
And how did you handle? How did you handle? Because this is also a question coming from our colleague Nedeljko Čurić. How did you? And this can be a question for all of you. How did you handle actually this special waste now coming from the? I'm talking about the masks, gloves, also disinfection, packaging and stuff. How did you handle that?
Yeah, well, I've seen that question also, and yeah, well, we did not handle anything specially, I have to say that. What the general recommendations were for that waste to be put in a separate bags, but also within the rest of the waste, to be double packed. Yeah, just to be double packed. Yeah, that was the only recommendation. The only difference that we had within Herceg-Novi, I think that I said that we had very few infected people, so we were lucky on that. We had quite a lot of people that had issued this obligatory isolation, but their waste was not treated separately. However, within the municipality, it was organized, quarantine was organized, but it was organized by the state. It was organized within the premises of the Health Institute Igala, and it was heavily guarded by the army. So all the obligations were on the state. All waste collected from the quarantine was taken by the army to the medical hazardous waste treating facility in a state capital. Actually, that we were being told.
So there is a responsibility of the state also in this kind of thing. Going back to this previous poll question. Thanks.
Those special circumstances only for the quarantine. Everything else was still obligations of the local level.
Okay, so since we are running out of time and this discussion is getting better, I would more interesting every minute. So just to move swiftly to Željko, how did you reorganize the services? What daily routines did you have to change? And can you also reflect a bit on the quantities and this handling of special waste type, so to say?
Yes, it's a really wide subject, but in short, to be, we hear in one hand, you had emergency measures that you had to implement. It is the protection of the health of the employees, as well as the maintenance, the waste management activities on the other hand. We implemented working from home where was possible, especially for the employees in the endangered health categories. Kindergartens were closed. Employees were absent from work, reducing, their time working from home and take child care. So we have the challenges with the reduced number of employees. The situation was difficult in the offices doing administrative work as well as in the field, on the streets. And we also had to redistribute people from workplace to workplace to sustain business, processes. Also, in Serbia, we have a quarantine restricted movement of citizens from 5 p.m. to 5 p.m. And we came out with two phrases from this, crisis. It was Mad Monday and Mad Friday. It's our quarantine lasts 22 hours from Friday to Monday. And actually, when the citizens were weekends fully locked down, they actually enormous waste enormous waste was collected in containers from 2 to 3 and 4 times more than was usual. And this happened on Monday, and this actually happened on Friday before the quarantine, weekend quarantine. So in order to disruptions in the waste management services, it was necessary to boost our collection these days, which required engagement of resources and manpower. Sometimes on Mondays and Fridays, the municipal waste disposal containers were emptied up to 5 times a day, even if the plan was once a day. And on the other hand, the amount of the waste in a period of 2 months, approximately, was lower for about 15 or 20%.
In general.
Yes, general. It's actually estimated that the largest influence and share in this reduction was actually from the companies. The company performed activities in reduced scopes, or they completely suspended their operations. Yeah. Also, we noticed the increase of green and biodegradable waste, and it was in suburban settlements, mostly generated from the yard work and maintenance, because citizens spent more time at home doing their chores around the houses, And also at the city level, we noticed a larger amount of so-called bulky waste. It was actually a lot of old furniture, probably from the basement or from the houses of the citizens, and this all caused the reorganization, as well as the need for a greater number of special vehicles for these purposes and more employees in the field than it was the practice. We also, from some additional activities, performed disinfection of public areas. In addition to regular cleaning that was performed during this period, the company actually paid special attention to cleaning the public areas around the hospitals and all the you mentioned earlier. Also, the waste that we collected from these areas was previously disinfected as a medical waste and shipped in special cassettes and destroyed under the controlling conditions. In the field of recycling, there were significant drop in recycling. Actually, the state of emergency alone has slowed down previous prepared activities in the field of recycling, such as installation special containers for recycling paper, glass, or plastic. Even in the period of almost 2 months, we noticed a drop in primary recycling of 57%. All of the citizens were mostly at home in that period, but they didn't, doing the primary recycling. Also, another reason why the smaller volume recyclables is insufficient number of people who were actually transferred to do the disinfection job. There were intense control of employees from the company on the streets, doing day and night in order to maintain, the public.
In terms of maintaining their health. Yes. Thanks, Željko. We have now only 5 or 6 minutes, and we have still some questions coming in from the audience, and we have also some questions that we received beforehand, and I just want this point to commend the colleagues that posed the questions. More or less, we covered it all. So we received a question from the Belgrade City Municipality of Zemun. We received a question from the city of Tivat. I'm showing them now on the screen, and we received also a question from colleague Marina from Kosovo, and also Sanja from Montenegro is asking about the reorganization of the services. I have a feeling that more or less we did cover all those issues. But now, since we have 5 minutes left, I want to. There is still a question about the let's say support from the central or other levels of government that I want you to comment very shortly. And if you have some final messages that you want to share with us, I would like to ask you to come forward now. Maybe we start with Thomas.
Well, experience is that the emergency planning worked rather good. Yes?
Sorry, we still have one poll question. So before you go,
yes, okay.
Goran, it's your turn now. Okay, this is a question that is actually, I mean, very close to my heart, but it's based on our feeling. How do we see the services organized during these times? Were they better, worse, or the same? So go on and vote, and I will switch to Thomas now. Thomas, please.
Well, the experience is that it was working as regular, mostly, the collection and treatment of household waste, at least. To take with you for the future, well, we can see that there's a dependency on materials and goods from abroad that can be a critical factor. There's a huge trust for just-in-time deliveries and limited storage for just-in-case situations. So maybe that's something to think about for the future, to have a bit more of storage of critical goods, materials, and to favorize local producers.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And also digital communication has been very crucial in these times. A lot of digital meetings, so to have a infrastructure for that capacity in fiber optics and broadband capacity.
Yeah. This is thanks for this. Actually, you're giving us a great entry to one of the next sessions where we are going to be discussing the resilience of the service, and all of this that you mentioned actually go very well along those lines, and also in terms of long and short-term planning.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for this, Thomas. Daniela, any last messages?
Yeah, well, last message or not, but as you asked within your question regarding the support from the central government or local government or within the sector of waste management, I have said that I'm not aware that we have anything like that with Montenegro. All the help, well, actually subsidies from the municipality toward the waste company are present at this point, or through the crisis. There were additional payments for obtaining disinfection materials, equipment for protection of the workers, and these things. And also we had donations, and that was very good donations from the citizens, even for those purposes. And there was a special account open for that. On the other side, municipalities altogether communicated with the Union of Municipalities of Montenegro, hoping to lobby to the central governments for helping the municipalities how to overcome this crisis, especially because we are still to see the crisis in economy in Montenegro. We're a country that we are depending on tourism, and this crisis is strongly influencing tourism and is influencing our income. That's why maybe altogether we had smaller quantity of waste, better recycling or habits within the population, and less eager people to spend more on some innovation or something like that. Yeah, more efficiency. Yeah, we are afraid what is going to happen in the future, and that's why it seems that we are different example from everybody else.
Yeah, thanks, Daniela. Željko?
Thank you.
Yes, listening to Thomas and Daniela, I realized that all the countries do the same thing, you know. We actually worked in the field in order to maintain communal order in the cities. The waste management operations were carried out in time, and public areas were cleaned in time, disinfected in time. In the period when all citizens were in their homes, in isolation, on quarantine, guarding themselves from the potential infection, a large number of employees of the public utility companies in the world have been on the streets, keeping the city clean for the citizens. Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Željko. And I think this is maybe a good closing message that yes, the services were delivered, although in very different circumstances, they were delivered timely and with a high quality. And this is something that with which we have to commend our colleagues working in the public utility companies, but also in the local authorities. We are not going to, maybe Boran, just give us a result of the final poll before I close the meeting. Yes, more than 50% think that the service was the same, and I think that's basically the impression, the general impression that everything worked, which is good. The question remains how this crisis will affect the services in the long run, especially with the economic issues that are, I mean, for time being put aside. Those kind of issues will come up in a very short period of time. So I'm not going to make any definite conclusions. What we are going to do together with NALAS, we're going to prepare a short reflection on this webinar and send it around to all participants. And with this, I want to close the meeting. I want to first of all thank to our panelists. I think that they were great. It's a pity that we couldn't have more time. I think there are still some questions that we left unanswered. And I also want to thank NALAS, Boran and NALAS Secretariat for making possible this kind of exchange between the professionals in the field in Southeast Europe. I hope to see you all next Wednesday, same time, same place. The topic will be actually provision the topic will be more directed to the health measures and the safety issues regarding the waste management services. Thanks you all once again, and goodbye.
Goodbye.